I'm Krisserin Canary.
And I'm Kelton Wright.
Follow our quest to publish our first novels.
From first drafts to query letters,
through inevitable rejection,
and hopefully eventual success.
From California
to Colorado, this is Pen Pals.
Hi, Krisserin.
Hi, Kelton.
How you doing?
I'm good. I feel like you and I did really well this week.
Yeah. I mean, listeners, obviously, Krisserin and I talk to each other throughout the week. So we have some updates. If we have really good updates, we are just like vague. We'll be like, I'm not telling you until the podcast.
But yeah, that's true. When they're really good, we saved them so we can get the live reaction.
Yeah. But this week
so
it was
too
just
exciting.
Constant texting.
Yes, it was. So I am good. I feel like I set out what I needed to do, not without a little bit of panic. So the original deadline for my grad school application, and on the website, it still says this, was February 1st, which coincidentally was a Sunday. And of course, I was like, let me wait until the last second to finish my essay and upload it. That's not this is after, by the way, I had my husband read it and he left the rudest comments on it.
Yeah, Krisserin screenshotted his comments and sent them to me, and I was affected by them.
He doesn't pull any punches, it's that Eastern European realism. And I told him I'm never asking you for feedback on anything.
No, all he does is throw punches in his feedback. It was brutal.
Yeah. And then I had a friend. I saw a lot of friends this weekend from college, which was really nice. But I was showing a friend of mine and she was like, I don't think you understand voice and style of a writer. And I was like, thank you. Because he just wasn't following. But anyhow, I did spend time fixing up my essay up until the last second. And then I went to go upload it. And the website is kind of funky. And I panicked. And I tried to reset my password. And they were like, this user doesn't exist. And then I really panicked because all of my transcripts and my recommendation letter and my applications all under this one pen. And so I did what they told me not to do, which was start a new application. And then I called the school and then I emailed the director all to find out that I was just clicking the wrong link the whole time. So on Monday, I get this email and this call from Veronica Bustamante, who I spoke to at EWP last year. And she was like, I'm so sorry that things weren't working. And I just wanted to be like, don't have your application deadline on a Sunday when the office is closed. You have a lot of really panicky people like me who obviously don't fall. Actually, that's one thing as an aside. As I was about to upload, I reread everything just to make sure. And I put the page numbers in the wrong location. So I had to redo all of those because God knows I'm a rule follower. That's the worst. When you just slightly fuck up the formatting and they're like, nope, disqualified.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was a bit of a stress bucket Sunday of my own making. But I did it. I uploaded it.
Good,
and then when Veronica called me, she's like, by the way, the deadline's the 15th. I was like, okay, well, it's done.
Were you like, it says the first on the website?
Yeah. And she's like, yeah, I know. There's a bug on the website, but we had a nice little chat. I said, do you remember me? And she's like, yeah, I remember you. And I'm so excited to read your application. And she sent me a nice note with the actual head of the program to say, thank you for submitting it. We got your application. And then, which was nice. And they said it would take 2 weeks, but they're going to be at EWP in, I think that's March 4th through 7th. And so after that, I should know.
That's really exciting.
Super exciting.
Well, Krisserin, we're both just waiting. I have a similar vibe of my week. Obviously, I was querying agents this week. And golly, it's applying to grad school once a day. Because you're like, what format do you want this in? How do I submit it? What are the rules? And the rules are so individual to each agency. And of course they are. But, it's It does feel a little like when you take a test in high school and underneath like in the instructions, it's like if you mark every answer as C, you'll get 100%. It like gives it away in the instructions that no one reads, you know? And it just feels like there's like these little items throughout the websites where they're like, oh, and by the way, I won't read it unless this person is CC'd. Or
Yeah.
it won't be read unless it's in Cambria. But this page needs to be
Cambria.
Times New Roman double space. And you're just like, oh my God, oh my God. And so I have 19 Google Docs open of different ways that I've built my query. And I will say I did successfully query 3 people, but it took an hour and a half to query 3 people. I just had that feeling immediately after querying all of them that I was like, I did something wrong. Something's messed up about the application. And because it was, you have that like, it's just an email you have to send in. I was like, don't reread it. Just let it go. Like, because it's worse if you follow up with some reason. And I was like, you took your time, you read the instructions, you did everything in your power to get it right. So just relax and have some faith in yourself.
Yeah, I know.
But it really, wow. It took a lot of the wind out of me.
Yeah, because it's just like logistical stuff. And that's why I freaked out about mine, because I was like, wait, let me just double, triple, quadruple check, because you don't want to get dinged on a technicality. That's the worst.
Totally.
So it's like very stress making. And I know you and I both take these things very seriously, very close attention to detail, perfectionism. And so that it does make it stressful. But then I will say that you start to kind of flub it a little bit as you get to your like 15th query. You're like, fuck it.
I'm sure. And like,
you just can't care that much about all of them. It's too hard.
I mentioned to you before we hit record that I was talking to a friend of mine who I didn't know was so knee deep in publishing. And we got into a conversation on Instagram DM last night about querying and agents, and she's incredibly well connected. And she offered to take a look at my proposal, and I sent it to her this morning, and she immediately had some really smart feedback. And I was like, oh, but I've already started. And so now I feel like my path is splintering, where there's going to be a version of this proposal that I send out like under a different title with a different query letter. And it's like, but I already shot my shot.
Shot your shot. I don't know.
Shot my shot with 3 people who I really respect and want to work with. And it's just as like, it never stops being stressful.
No, it's so true, because when you start with your top agents, but as you go through the querying process, you learn things and things change. And so you're kind of like, shit, I wish I had this query for that agent that I already queried.
And it's tough.
Yeah, I remember I went back and like re-edited the book again and had read through what I sent to these other agents. And I was like, oh my God. I can't believe I sent them this. This is horrible. But it's a learning process, and, you know.
Yeah. And like just the websites are all like, you'll hear back in 2 to 3 months if you hear at all.
At all. Yeah.
Which I understand. Like I used to be a managing editor, and there were just so many pitches. And those were short pitches. Those were like 3 paragraphs, you know, and you were like, I just can't reply to all of these. And so it makes sense with proposals that, you know, they're like documents that you can't get through them all. And it's also, you know, you don't want to spend your day giving nasty feedback because you don't even want to be gentle in it. Like, sorry, you know, it's like, it's a form submission saves some ache for them too. They're people. It's just like on my query tracker, knowing, okay, I queried January 29th. Can't wait to hear by April.
I know.
But
it comes faster than you think, though.
I'm sure it will, but also, you know, I am hopeful that the agent who reached out will be interested. So you never know. And like it does, as I put myself out there and say I'm querying on social media and in Substack, there have been multiple people who are like, Oh, I'm connected to this person. Want me to put you in touch? Oh, I know this person. Oh, I have an agent. You want to talk to him? And I'm like,
Oh, I
huh.
am an agent and I
Uh-huh. Oh, I am an agent. Yeah, we have an agent listening, guys.
Yay. We're gonna have to have Lauren on the podcast.
Hi, Lauren. So yeah, it's just golly, getting all your ducks in a row, man. But I did it. I queried 3 agents. That's what we're supposed to say. I
Yeah.
queried 3 agents. So the book
Yeah.
is moving in that direction, and it felt really, really cool to do so, to be like moving into that next step of creation.
Well, I think it's a really good segue to talk about our guest that is on the podcast today, because we are going to talk about agents and querying, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the mistakes that a lot of us make early on. Before I do our little intro, I think we should celebrate the fact that we both completed our goals this week, which I don't know if we've done that in a while.
I know, it
So
feels like it's been a really long time since we actually both completed them. So yay us. We did
yay.
it. Yay.
All right. Well, listeners, we have quite a treat on the podcast for you this week. If you've been listening for any length of time, I'm sure you've heard me talk about my teacher and mentor, Mark Sarvas, who I met through the UCLA Extension Program. And we have the delight and the joy of chatting with him today and hearing his words of wisdom, which I'm sure will be many. So Mark Sarvas is, if you didn't know, he's the award-winning author of novels Ugman, Memento Park, and Harry Revised. Memento Park is the winner of the 2019 American Book Award and the 2019 American Jewish Library Association Fiction Award. It was a finalist for the Sammy Rohr Prize for Jewish Literature. It was shortlisted for the J.Q. Wingate Literary Prize and longlisted for the Sophie Brody Medal. His debut novel, Harry Revised, was published in more than a dozen countries around the world, earning raves from Le Monde to The Australian. Memento Park was published by FSG, by the way, and Harry Revised by Bloomsbury. So these are big publishers that published his novels. Yeah. So as I said, he teaches advanced novel writing in the UCLA Extension Writers Program, which is well worth your money with Mark. We're going to talk about workshops and what makes a good workshop with him later. He holds an MFA in creative writing and literature from Bennington College. He lives in Monterey, on the Monterey Peninsula, and can be found on Blue Sky, and he maintains an irregular newsletter called The Eternal Recurrence. So a fun fact about Mark is he was kind of one of the first, build a platform, get an agent writers back in like 2008. He had a blog that had quite a few readers. We're going to talk about that as well. And it definitely paved the way for him to publish. So he was a trailblazer back like almost 20 years ago. So listeners, without further ado, Mark Sarvas.
I consent.
You consent?
I consent.
You consent to the interview?
I do. I do.
All right, listeners, I'm so excited to welcome Mark Sarvas to the podcast. If you have been a listener for any length of time, you've probably heard me mention his name because he is not only my favorite teacher, but also a mentor and a friend. Mark is the author of several novels. I found 2 of them. I couldn't find Harry Revised. I was looking all over for it. It is somewhere in my house. So Harry Revised, Memento Park. And then I was going to ask you, because I always thought this was Ugman. But then when I read the beginning of it, is it a UG man? Because it's
Ugman.
based on the
I call him Ugman. Yes.
Ugman.
Ugman.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I like that. It kind of lends to like a caveman identity for him as well.
Exactly right.
It works on multiple levels. So yeah, Mark has been my teacher for quite a long time. I think the first class I ever took with you was in 2013. So we're talking 13 years.
And
It's been a long time.
And I haven't alienated you yet. That's great. So
No, not at all. But I feel like I do know a little bit about your origin story, the fact that you had this blog, The Elegant Variation, and kind of helped you get to publishing your first book, Harry Revised. But I would love to hear a little bit about, how it all went down and how you became a writer and how you found your agent and just your path to publishing.
gosh, the full origin story. I will try to give a semi-abbreviated version so that I don't consume our whole hour just wandering through that. But I actually, I started out as a screenwriter for many years, and I moved to LA as a screenwriter. And was one of those who, sold some things and optioned some things. Nothing ever got produced. And after one particularly horrible meeting with a producer for whom I was writing his passion project, I called my agent and said, "Yeah, I'm not doing this anymore." And returned to really my first love, which was writing fiction. And I launched my blog, the Elegant Variation, now sadly deceased. And I imagine your readers will know what blogs are. That almost feels like ancient internet history at this point. But it was I'm fond of joking. It was the one time in my life I was in the right place at the right time. And blogs were becoming a thing, and book blogs in particular had the attention of readers and the press, and an alternative to, mainstream book reviews and all that. And I had a little niche of sorts because I was writing about Los Angeles and Los Angeles literary scene. Most of the book blogs that existed at that moment were very Brooklyn and New York centric. And I was also writing about, I think, some then obscure European writers who I really loved, who I hadn't seen in the discussion. So, it was very organic. It was really just for fun. There was no kind of scheming or, oh, I'm going to create a blog to have a platform. So that sort of thinking didn't really even exist then. It was some cool people on the internet having a fun conversation, and I elbowed my way in. And around that same time, I started writing my first novel. And, I did this relatively late in my life compared to some. I was 38 when I started seriously getting into writing Harry, and I was 44 by the time it was published. If you've ever read William Goldman's great book about screenwriting, Adventures in the Screen Trade, he is a very famous formulation that he uses. He would talk about how studio executives would refer to something as a non-recurring phenomenon. It was a movie that was successful, but they couldn't explain why. It wasn't, part of a established IP or a franchise. And my route to finding an agent was definitely a non-recurring phenomenon, because so it's not something your listeners could easily reproduce. At the height of my blog, I had 50,000 readers a day coming in. I was it was
That's a
crazy.
lot
Yeah, it
of
was crazy.
readers.
It was crazy. It was insane. I was often quoted in the newspapers. I would break occasional stories, and then newspapers would pick them up. But I also, obviously got very plugged in with the publicists at the various publishing houses, and then even editors who would begin to reach out to me about writers they thought I would like. So, there were definitely these relationships forming. I was invited to write book reviews for the New York Times Book Review, the result being that my name was out there. And so really, I went through the process like anybody else does. I very painstakingly worked on a first draft, which we could talk about later, we can talk about now, but and I teach this to my students. I did 8 full drafts of the book before I sent it out. So, I mean, you could bounce a quarter off the bed sheet. It was that tight and polished and ready to go. So when I sent the queries, agents knew who I was. And that was like the only advantage that I had. I sort of got to cut the line a little bit. They saw my name in the inbox, like, oh, let me take a look at this. But, nobody was going to take on a book they didn't like just because I was a blogger. So I had a very short list of agents to start, on which the agent who I signed with, and who is my agent to this day, responded very quickly. This really places it in time. I was sending it out, I think it was 2007. Is that right? Gosh, my memory, man, maybe it was earlier than that. But I, there was another agent who had asked me, he was interested, a well-known older agent, and he asked me to mail him the first 50 pages. So print out, put 50 pages in an envelope, send it to his office. Simon just asked me, Simon Lipscar, who at Writer's House, who has been my agent since my first novel, and who I love dearly and will sing his praises today, said, just send me the whole book as an email attachment. So of course, he read it faster and got back to me quickly. We had a phone call, and it is a little bit like a love match. It's like a first date. It's like falling in love. And you have the first date where you're like, yeah, this is a train wreck, this is not my person. And then you have the first date where you just know. And that was the kind of call Simon and I had. But I'm old school and I wanted to go to New York and look him in the eye, just to feel he was on the level, which I did. And that was that. And he has been my guy ever since, and taken very good care of a literary fiction writer who is not doing much to pay his bills and pay his overhead these days. So very, very grateful for that. So agent for life.
You mentioned you did 8 drafts of Harry Revised. Is it the same process for every novel that you've worked on? You work it that much before, and when do you send it to Simon, or when do you tell him that you're working on something?
That's a great question. And no, it's very different now for a couple of reasons. When you're sending out your first novel and you're looking for an agent, that agent is assuming that they are seeing your absolute best, polished, everything you are capable of is in that book. Nothing is left on the table. And so that's what I went out with. And my 8th draft was a painstaking sentence by sentence reading it out loud, just looking at each sentence individually. Is it grammatically correct? Is it interesting? Is it, and ticking it off. By the second book, we were married. It's like, I don't have to dress up for the first date anymore. So, and I think at that point, with Simon, I do 2 things with Simon. Typically I will send him when I'm starting something new and I have about 30 or 40 pages. I will just send him that to take a look at. And really, he said long ago that his only job at that juncture is to look at it and say, yes, there's a novel in this. Sometimes he gets people and they're fiddling with an idea and his experience and instinct will tell him, this doesn't feel like it will sustain a full novel. With my second novel, Memento Park, I sent it to him. He looks at the voice. He really loved the voice. He was interested in some of the narrative questions that had already popped up, and he said, go. And then he didn't see anything from me for 4 years, because Memento Park took a very long time to write the first draft. That was 4 years. And even that draft, I did not send him. I did a pretty major reworking of that first draft, because as you go further in your writing career, you learn more, you know more, you get better, and you develop more confidence in your judgment. I finished that first draft and I knew, okay, here's the 3 big things that suck right now about this book that I'm not going to show my agent and I went back in and I fixed those. And then it was really, I think I tidied up that draft a little bit, the prose, so third draft, and that's what I sent him. Because at that point, he doesn't need to see a finished, ready to sell project. It is more of a collaboration. And he and I are talking about, okay, where does this book still need to go and how do we need to work it out? And so he's always been sort of hands off with me. He doesn't get in the weeds. He told me when I interviewed him that he was a very hands-on agent and that he did do that, but with plenty of his clients. But I think, we joke that we disagree on a lot of fiction, stuff that I love, he hates, and stuff that he loves, I don't. But he says, but we both agree on the fiction of Mark Sarvas. And so it seems like he trusts what I do, and he gets it. Ugman was such a strange book. It was such a weird ass departure for me. I wrote it fast. It was angry. It was all these kinds of things. I thought, oh God, Simon's gonna just kill me. And he loved it. He read it. He loved it. He got it. He had virtually nothing, to suggest on those initial drafts. I had some things I wanted to fix, and so I went back in and I did that anyway. But it has been a great relationship, and I'm very grateful for him.
Not surprised on Ugman. I feel like it was the catharsis of all of us going through the same thing, because the book takes place in the last 6 months of 2019. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, what do you think Ugman's doing in February of 2026?
So
Is he still a keyboard warrior?
Well, if I said what I really think, I would probably get a knock on my door from unwelcome authorities. So let me say this, that I think, one of his lessons in Ugman is he learns to leave the basement. He learns to step out into the world. So I think he'd be in Minnesota right now protesting. I hope he would not be behind the keyboard anymore, but it is certainly seductive to fall back into that raging place. So, but it's really, Ugman is a cautionary tale about the way that deforms us, if we give into that, so, which I was absolutely guilty of.
I'm curious. I feel like I've taken so much of what you've taught me about querying and agents and shared it with people, not only Kelton, but our listeners and other people. And the thing that you've always said is don't rush, slow down. You only have one opportunity to make a first impression. You need to put your best foot forward. But on the other side, Kelton's kind of she's just starting to query right now. And she got a DM from a dream agent, just someone who found her on Substack and messaged her. And so she's kind of in this really special time where she's trying to figure out what her path is going to be and who she's going to work with. But she listens to, I forget the name of the podcast. It's a UK-based podcast, and they interviewed two different agents. And of course, all agents are different. One said, yes, I expect you to have paid for an editor and to actually have this manuscript perfectly in the best possible condition it could be before I see it. And the other one was like, absolutely not. But I wonder from your perspective, because you have so many students going through your class, I don't even want to guess how many students you've taught through UCLA Extension. It has to be probably 1,000 at this point.
Yeah.
Do you find that your experience querying is how people are querying now? Do you find that it's different, that agents behave and act differently? Do you find that they are as involved in the developmental process, or are they just kind of letting it pass over their desk before they go off into submission? I'm curious if you've seen a change.
This is sort of, I think, the most interesting question, because I thought a lot about, like, when you invited me to come on this podcast, is that my operational field data is 20 years old in a way, because I queried once, got my dream agent, and have been with him ever since. I'm certain much has changed. Plenty's still the same. And what I know anecdotally from my students who've gone through it, my girlfriend, when she got her agent, and I'm watching how these things go. And I think some things remain the same and some things are different. I think that, to tack back for a moment to your UK editors, um, I think it's a bit haughty to insist that one has paid an editor. But I think on the other side, the absolutely not camp, I think what any agent will tell you, and if they don't, you should be suspicious of them, is that they expect when they get your work that they are getting your most considered work. And that doesn't mean that every now and then an agent will not be open to, oh, I see something in this work, and no, it's not quite ready, but this one's not quite letting me go, and so I want to work with the writer. But that's very rare. It really is, and increasingly so, I think. I think the demands of the pipeline and all of that, people are looking for things that feel ready. And it doesn't mean that the book's going to come in, they're going to slap the agency jacket on it and just submit. An agent will typically still have some things, but not, I think, there's not a lot of appetite for major reworking of a book. And this is why I hear this from a lot of people, that when they're on submission, they don't get notes. They don't get, they get no specifics. They get, well, thank you, we liked the writing, but it's not for our list. And they were like, well, if they like the writing, why don't they rep me? And the truth, I tell them, is, well, they probably didn't like the writing as much as they're saying. They're being nice. But I think what's more important is if they start to offer specific feedback, it implies an openness to a kind of ongoing work that a lot of agents just don't, I think, have the time for. It's not even the desire for, but it's the time for. These are, people under pressure to deliver, working on commissions, and they've got to find their work. So what has changed, I think, is ghosting culture, which is just a big fucking drag, but it's, whatever, man. That's where we are now. When we went out with Ugman, Simon told me that had really even infected the world of editors, where editors who he'd worked with for 20 plus years just ghost on a submission. And I think that's fucked up, and that sucks. And sorry about
It's weird. It's like, that's a professional relationship. That's kind of strange.
And look, man, I kept a list, right? Who ghosted us. And we will not submit to that.
Like Ugman,
Yeah.
you have a
On
list.
that one, I do, because I'm not going to submit to that editor again. And these are editors who I respect. You know, they're well known. You'd know their names. But if you can't even bother like a pro forma kind of note back, it's like, so I think writers have to navigate a lot of that kind of, internet age bad habits. I don't want to sound like a cranky old fart, but and that's something I think that it just feels harder today. I don't want to discourage any of your listeners, and I think if you've written your novel and you believe in it, then you got to go go go. But I do think that it's gotten harder. I think that Simon used to say to me that he likes to, when we put a book on submission, and he would give me little notes. Like he said, I like to take away the easy pass. Like if he can see the thing in the book that's going to give them the easy reason to pass, let's fix that. Let's get that out of there. And I think in a way, authors querying agents have to think about, okay, what's the easy pass? I'm working with one of my former students who's now a private client who's written a really cool but really tricky to pitch book. And it's one of those books where like you got to read it, you got to give it a chance. But if you just heard the summary, you might not go for it. And so, it's you have a very little window to make an impression. You got to be sharp. You got to, grab the attention, and it is hard. I would not want to be looking for an agent again at this point in my life, with the way the market is sitting right now. But they are hardworking. I have not yet encountered or heard of a literary agent who's the equivalent of a used car salesman, where they're just, trying to move units. They're all doing it because they love this stuff. They want to be excited about your book. They want to fall in love. And when you look for an agent, you got to fall in love. That's, it's got to be mutual. I've had Simon turn down, I've sent some people to him who were already published looking to change agents. And he would read their books and he would say, look, this is great. Someone's going to sell this, but I'm not in love with it. And it takes too much time and energy to go out with something that you're not in love with. And so I really tell people, try not to take the stuff personally when they pass. It just means, and I feel like they're doing you a favor, because if they're not in love with you, they shouldn't take the book out. You should wait for the one who just loves it, who gets it, and you get the sense like they're going to move heaven and earth to put this book in front of people.
I want to ask you what you think is worth spending money on as a writer. But before I get to that, I'm curious. I'm on TikTok a lot. Admitted, I've said it. I'm ashamed of it, but it is my way of like decompressing. And I do get a lot of content from writers who are trying to build a platform. You made a joke about it in the beginning, kind of like, I'm going to build a platform and then I'm going to get an agent. But I feel like a lot of writers think that that is what they have to do. Having a platform definitely helps. We had one author on who was an influencer before she published her first book, and she had a huge following, and it did definitely help her get an agent. And I'm just wondering if you notice with your students, because you have, new waves of students coming through your classes all the time who start in novel 1 and progress through novel 5, if you feel like the impatience has gotten greater. Because the content that I see on TikTok, it's like day 5 of me writing my debut novel. And it's like, these people are working on their first drafts.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to be doing this for years. It's going to be like day 1000 of me working on my debut novel. And I don't want to be mean in the comments, but my heart goes out to them because they're so earnest, right?
Yeah.
And what they're doing is just, I don't think people understand.
Yeah.
It's harder to get published and it takes so long.
Yeah. It is
8 drafts.
It is a marathon.
To write a book.
It is a marathon. One of the things that I tell all my students, and I just had this conversation with someone who is in my private workshop who just finished the first draft of his novel. And I said, go and celebrate. Get your wife, have her take you to somewhere fancy and celebrate. And he was really reluctant because, but it's a mess and it's a da-da-da. And I said, you must celebrate. If the only thing you're going to celebrate is getting published, then you're going to have a long, dry road for many, many, many years. And you have to celebrate that first draft. You celebrate the draft you're ready to send to agents. You celebrate the first agent who asks to see your pages. You really have to celebrate those moments because it takes a ridiculous long time. Look, I think you're right to be, kind and compassionate for our, naive young TikTokers. And I think honestly, when I'm not on TikTok at all. I look at reels and I know
You should not
no,
be.
no.
You should not be
No,
on
I know.
TikTok.
I look at reels, and I imagine I know some of that stuff is
Mhm.
coming over from TikTok. But
Yeah.
when I see somebody like that, honestly, I just like, you're gonna find out. Like, that's it. You'll learn. You'll find
Godspeed.
out. You're gonna find out. And so that journey is theirs to take. But I think, I think if you're when you're talking about the dread P word, if you're writing nonfiction of a certain kind, then platform takes on a different relevance because it speaks to authority. What is your authority to be writing on this topic? Not with novels. And I mean, I get it if you're writing in a genre, like if you're writing hardcore romance or fantasy and you're kind of very visible in those worlds. That's not unlike sort of what I did coming up as a blogger. But on the other hand, I'll I'll name drop a little bit for one of my biggest success stories, my client, Miranda Heller, who wrote The Paper Palace. Not on social media, not a blogger, a grown-up writer of a certain age like me, wrote her first novel. And, she just wrote the shit out of it. She just wrote the shit out of it. So that when it landed on a desk, it was so inarguably good and compelling that people didn't care if they're on TikTok or not. Like, we'll figure that out later. And that's my answer to that. The platform argument is no, because I remember when I made the conscious decision to stop posting on the Elegant Variation, and it was the calculus that I could either devote my energies to being an internet personality, or I could devote my energies to becoming a better novelist. And that was a very easy choice for me to make. When the work is that good, it just speaks for itself. And I think everybody should aspire to their novel being that good, that it is sort of inarguable, irrefutable. When this hits someone's desk, that they're just going to see, wow, there's something major in these pages. And she's a great example of, #1 New York Times bestseller, became a Reese Witherspoon book, all those kinds of things. So
The dream.
yeah.
The dream.
A dream. A dream. It's not the only literary dream, but it is.
Sure.
If you offered me, Reese Booker the Booker Prize, I would take the Booker Prize. So
Sure.
the dreams can vary, but it's a good dream to have. And interestingly, let me just say that it was not Miranda's dream at all, which I think speaks to the way these things happen. That was not on her radar to have that kind of a thing. She just believed in this book. She wanted it in the world, and it was a knockout. So she was the first day she was in class, and we workshopped her pages for the first time. After class, I told her that it reminded me of James Salter, and she burst into tears. It was that meaningful. So those are the things I think that sustain us in the writing, and it has to be that the passion and the pleasure and the excitement is during the writing, because after that, man, you got no control. It is out of your hands.
Yeah, it's
So,
true. That's completely true. I'm kind of that same vein as it's Miranda, you
yeah,
said her name?
yeah.
Because I'm just like, if anything happens, great. I just want to write this book. But there are people out there that like to like have manifestation boards, and I can't do that.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a Libra like me. Maybe we're the same in that respect. We just like we do things a little bit differently.
I just think you're thinking about the wrong thing, and this is the
Yeah.
thing. I used to say to my students, if you're working on your book and you're already compiling your list of dream agents, then you're in trouble, because you are giving up important parts of your brain and your processing power to that piece of planning that has nothing to do with where you are. And so I know I risk sounding, I don't know, like a cranky, old-fashioned, boring white guy or whatever, but it's just like the work on the page is everything. And that's where all the energy has to go. And anything that isn't devoted to improving that work, to improving yourself as a writer, to, is noise, and it is not helping you. I just,
Yeah, Les Plesko used to say he allows himself 5 minutes to dream and then he got back to work,
yeah, that's,
which I liked that.
yeah,
I like that.
yeah.
But I am curious, I've written one book without you,
Mhm.
and every book since I've written with you and have engaged in your editing services, almost like you're a little bit of a crutch, but I love it. I'm just curious, what do you think is worth spending on when it comes to
You had asked
as
that.
a writer?
Yeah. That is a complicated question, right? Because not everybody's means are the same. And you know this about me, we don't talk about these things a lot, but I'm kind of a class warrior, and even though I like to stay in fancy hotels and eat Michelin stars, I'm actually always really thinking about these differences in class. And so for every example I might offer what you could spend money on, there's also here's the road for the people who don't have that to spend. So for example, I think the first and the most important thing is to build your library. That's where you're going to learn everything, is by reading and thinking about great fiction. Obviously, if you don't have a lot of money to buy books, the library is essential, but surrounding yourselves with the kind of books you want to write, the kind of books you want to learn from, I think is hugely important. So that's a good use of money and time. Um, I get asked about MFAs a lot. As you know, I went back and got an MFA after I had published my first two novels, which raised some eyebrows. Very unmysterious reason I wanted to have that degree so that I could potentially teach at a college level, to have that option. I don't know that the financial investment was necessarily worth it for me, in terms of the student loan, but it's fine. I can manage it okay, and I can live with it. I've had students literally for whom money is no object, like they can write the check for the tuition and go. And then I say, yeah, go, because you will be immersed for 2 years. You have the privilege of thinking extensively about literature and writing and books, and have a cohort. And yeah, if the money doesn't matter, but if the money does matter, I don't know that anybody should go into debt for this kind of thing. I think if you're somebody for whom money is an object, looking at fully funded programs which are more competitive, but you don't incur the debt, are things to go. And then look, I think editing and instruction are great uses of your money, if you can afford it. My friend, the novelist Marissa Silver, advised me when I was debating whether or not to go to Bennington for my MFA. She said that her father had told her that you should never miss an opportunity to invest in yourself. And I think that was reasonable, and it made sense within my financial parameters. I think, you know, if you want to work with a private editor and you can afford it, and there are ranges, right? There are people who charge a good deal less than I do. There are people who charge a good deal more than I do. Um, and then there are things like the UCLA Extension, where we met, and where you get a certain level of instruction. And that program has really grown and become something, I think, much more impressive and powerful than it was when I began in 2009. And you plug into a cohort, you can find yourself a little workshop. So, but I think one has to be cognizant about one's financial picture and obligations, and at the same token, you've got your hierarchy of needs. And what I would say to people, the people who make it as writers, in my experience, are the people who, after they have met that first critical level, you know, roof over our head, food over the table, children not dead, then the next level is of their time, chunk of time, is writing, is doing that work, devoted to that work, not binging on Netflix, not going out with your friends, not doing Pilates, not none of it. All of it waits until that time you commit to the writing is done. I think the same can be said about your financial resources. Like you figure it out, and after you have addressed the things you must address, you look at what remains, what is within reach for you. And there are also a lot of things, like there's fellowships and grants and residencies and things that offer opportunities for people who cannot afford it, don't have the means, are marginalized. All those kinds of communities do have ways in. So it's not a brilliant observation to say money's nice if you got it. And if you got it, then go ahead and by all means avail yourselves of some of these services that are out there. Although be careful of the ripoffs, because there are many. But if you don't have it, there are still ways to get there to approximate those experiences, but it all starts with the books. It all starts with the library.
I like thinking about it not just as that financial budget, but a commitment budget.
Yeah.
It's like if you have the money to go to an MFA, great. If you don't, maybe skip the shopping and the hanging out with friends to like spend that time focusing on your writing. You can employ essentially like an at-home retreat for a week or like an intensive writing program for yourself just by setting the restrictions on your calendar.
That's exactly.
And I, it's hard. It's a hard commitment, but if you want to be a writer.
But that's it is a hard commitment. But honestly, like writing novels is hard. It's not easy. Everybody, there's this notion, oh, everybody has a book in them. Oh, I'm going to write my novel one day. It's actually very difficult, and it requires sustained discipline, commitment, focus, which is why most people don't finish their novels and why lots of people fall away. We used to do, when Jennifer and I lived down in LA, now I live up in Pacific Grove on the Monterey Peninsula. It's sort of my dream little town. But we would come up here for a writing weekend. There's a little bed and breakfast. It wasn't too expensive. We'd go Thursday to Sunday, leave LA at the crack of dawn, come up here, write for 3 days, in the room, in the cafe. We take walks, and then we went back. And the trip was devoted to having that writing time. And I think that's really the kind of level of commitment that it takes. So
one question I really want to ask you, and then I want to ask you about residencies, because I
Sure.
feel like you do a good job of applying and attending those. I asked a prior guest, Leslie Bannaton, about this. I'm really interested in understanding how you improve your craft. What do
Yeah.
you do to continually improve your writing?
A lot of it's going to come back to reading and who I read and writers who are doing interesting things that influence or inspire me that I feel like I can learn from. But honestly, the truth is that with each novel, I set intentions for myself that I know are outside of what I can do, outside of what I've done before, and I know that I can do. I make it harder each time. I introduce new challenges, and in solving those challenges, one picks up new tools. So the novel that I'm writing right now, my fourth, different than anything I've ever written before. And my books are all quite different. Simon talks about that in his pitch letters as a pro, but I think sometimes it is a con as he's trying to figure out how to position and sell me. But this novel is historical, which I've never done. It is multiple third person close points of view, which I've never done. I love first person, and that's kind of my thing. And there are some other things that are tricky as hell that I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do. And I always like to say to my students that writing novels is just a daily exercise in problem solving. You sit down every day. What is the problem that is in front of me? I need to bring this character to life. I need to figure out how to convey this emotion. I need to make this scene, give it an energy that it lacks. It's problem solving. And I think the bigger the problems, the more you have to learn in order to solve them. And so that's really kind of the way I go about that. So
it's a very athletic approach. It's like you ran your 5K, great,
Right.
going to a 10K, going to do the marathon, signing up for an ultra.
exactly.
It's like building on it to accomplish something
Yeah.
greater, which I've never thought about that in challenging yourself beyond novels. I'm working on a nonfiction proposal, and Krisserin knows I have a novel in the works, but it's my first novel. And so I haven't gotten to this sort of thinking about like, how would I challenge myself beyond this one? Because I find this first one so challenging.
Well, and the first one,
I'm still figuring out how to run the marathon.
yeah, and the first novel is just the proof of concept. In a way, the first novel is telling yourself, I can do this. And there is a lot of confidence that you will get when you finish that. However it turns out. It's like, okay, I've broken that psychological barrier. I know I can do this. And so the next one doesn't necessarily become easier because each novel has its own problems. And I think they're all first novels in some ways, but you don't have that existential, oh, I don't even know if I can do this at all, because you've done it once before, and that helps.
And it very well could be that I find out I don't like running and I just like lifting weights, and
Exactly.
so I turn back to the form of essay.
Yep.
But it is interesting to think about it in that way. So
Yep.
I'm inspired by that to work on novel two.
And I used to be a cyclist, so I rode centuries. So that sort of training model, very resonant, watching each week the mileage getting longer as I was working up toward that 100-mile ride. So I think that is
Mhm.
it's a good observation.
I'm really interested in your reading life because every time I see you post about, I've also been in Mark's home and seen how many books do you have? Your library's
It's
quite
you asked
impressive.
about that. It's probably pushed up to 4,000 now because I have a problem. I just keep buying. And Jennifer will sort of jokingly chide me when the bookshop.org deliveries start arriving and there's, a dozen new books, and she points out, my office is filled with my various to read shelves and books I'm reading in progress, and I just keep getting more and more. But in secret, she loves it because suddenly she heard about on the calculation of volume, and of course I have all three, so she was just able to come right in here and grab them. So I think she doesn't really mind that I acquire them at such a furious pace, but I do get them much faster than I read them. So but yes, it's about 4,000 books, of which 85%, 80% is fiction. 75, 80% is fiction, and the rest is divided between literary criticism, writers' biographies and letters, nonfiction essays, some history, philosophy, art, drama, all the good stuff. But each of those fits into a single bookcase or a portion of a bookcase. And the fiction collection, I think, now has moved up to 17 billies and growing. So it just keeps going.
Amazing. So you're going on a residency in March? You're going to France?
I, I am.
I feel like you do this at least once a year, if not more. You go somewhere fantastic and whittle away at whatever your current work in progress is. How do you find these residencies? What do you get out of them?
Um, yeah, I have a lot to say about residencies that I hope will be helpful to your listeners because it really was an evolution for me in terms of embracing the awesomeness of the residency. Let me step back just to say that as your listeners think about residencies, as with anything else, there's a hierarchy of residencies, right? And there are, maybe I should just say, for those who don't know, that a writing residency is a place you apply. There's an application process. And if you're accepted, you get to go to some awesome place that they have, and they'll give you a room and sometimes meals and sometimes not. And then you get to write for, can be a week, 2 weeks, a month. Some of them go many 10 weeks and beyond. Some of them have a modest copay that as the you need to pay to go. Others pay for your room only, but you have to bring your food. Others pay for your room and board, and others still pay for your room and board and travel to get there. And obviously, as you go up that chain, they become more competitive, more difficult, etc. Uh, I had done a couple of smaller local residencies. There's a great one that I send a lot of my students to called Dorland Mountain Arts, which is down in Temecula. It's one that, you pay a very modest amount. I think it was like $500 for the week. And I had a full cabin with a grand piano in it to myself and a kitchen and all the rest. And I had done some other smaller ones, and then last year, I was accepted to VCCA, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and I was originally going to go for 3 weeks, and I'm a parent of a teenage kid, and so I had to cut that down to 2 weeks, and it was kind of a game changer for me. I'd say VCCA also has a modest sort of copay, but it's out in, not quite completely rural Virginia, but certainly a small town area. You have a living quarters with a ensuite bathroom, bed and armchair, and very civilized. And then you have a separate work studio. And what was most important that kind of blew my mind, it sounds so trivial, is that all your meals are handled. So you come out in the morning, there's a breakfast buffet. You get what you want, then you go up to your studio. Your lunch is delivered up to your studio, so you don't have to break your flow. Then dinner is served communal style at about 6:30, and then some of us would go back to our studios after dinner and keep working. And, it's nice. There's about 25 artists in residence at times. So the dinner is a nice communal affair, and there's writers and painters and composers and interesting people. I made some great friendships while I was there. But not having to think about, we stop 3 times a day to figure out our meals. Shit, who am I going to DoorDash from even takes time to figure out. And to just not think about it, to not be interrupted by it. At that point, I was starting this fourth novel. So I was in a very research intensive period. And I just disappeared into the novel. I was so immersed without interruption in a way that I never have. And I've written 3 novels, successfully executed without getting into that kind of a state. And, Jennifer, my girlfriend, would always encourage me to go do residencies, go do them, get out of the fucking house. Now, go do the residencies. And I would say, I don't need to. I have a great office here at home. I close the door. I'm disciplined. I'm a very driven and productive. But I did it. And I got so excited by the experience while I was up there that about 3/4 through the residency, I applied for 12 more for the following year. I went different for those 12, which was I kind of notched it up to slightly more gold-plated, much more competitive residencies. So the one that you referred to is the Dora Maar House, the Dora Maar Cultural Center in Provence area in France. I have been applying there for almost 10 years, on and off. It was one that I really wanted to go do. It was, for writers sort of mid-career. I have a number of friends, like 3 or 4 friends who had done it there and really loved it. And I kept getting rejected, and I kept getting, butthurt and pissy, and I would complain to Jennifer, like, fuck them, I'm not applying again. Blah. And after a few years, she was like, you should really apply to Dora Maar again. And I would. And then last year, I got waitlisted, which was encouraging. I got a step closer. But this novel that I'm writing right now, I have caught a live one. Like this is a big deal book, and I can feel it and I know it. And I'm fundamentally a lazy person. I'm actually a pretty lazy guy. And I would get irritated at the complexity of some of these residency applications that, truth, are not that complicated. And I had a tendency of sort of half-assing them in the past. I know this because the idea was, well, they'll accept me on my reputation, and if they don't, I can tell myself it was because I half-assed it, and I could save face. And I decided not to half-ass this one. I decided I'm gonna put my shoulder and write the shit out of the application and really swing for the fences on this one. And I put in a dozen applications, and to give you the tote board of where we stand today, 6 of them are still outstanding. I'm waiting to hear. I got 3 passes, which is fine. I have been accepted to 2. Dora Maar's the first. I've been accepted to another one in November. That's a big fancy one, but I'm not allowed to announce it until they announce it, so I have to be hush hush. And I think I'm on the edge for one that I applied for in Switzerland. I'm waiting to hear back from them. It was ecstatic news when I heard about Dora Maar because I had tried for so long. And so to finally get that, it really reminded me that, it's not personal. It's not about you. You're applying for one of 3 spaces, and there's, hundreds of applicants. And you just have to sort of wait for your moment when the thing you're working on connects with the readers who are reading the applications, and then you go for it. So, we'll see how the rest of them do. So, and I may get no more. This could be it, and that's still a home run year to have 2 month-long residencies.
It's just so aspirational too. You described yourself as mid-career, and it's like, you write the first book, the point is to write many more and to have all of these accomplishments keep coming and coming and coming, and that there's always something to strive for and new people to meet and to just expand what you're capable of. I find it very motivating to think about, I have a toddler at home, so I can't really go anywhere quite yet.
Right.
But in the years to come, there's so much to look forward to in terms of applying and rejecting and
Exactly.
and hoping.
And my toddler is a teenager. There was many, many years I did not do the residencies, and the kid was the reason. So, but now was the moment to do them. And honestly, for me, the second book was even more exciting and special than my favorite part of my second novel is the page that says also by Mark Sarvas, and it has my first book there, because that suggests you're not a flash in the pan. You're not one and done. Like you're beginning something. And then in Ugman, there were 2 books there, and now in my new book there will be 3 books there. And you really like to see that accrual of your body of work taking place, you know?
Do we have time for one more question?
I know where to go, man. I'm a writer, you know? My time is my own, so yes, please.
Well, you know, obviously I met you as a teacher, and I find your workshops are incredibly productive. And part of the reason why they are so productive is you have pretty strict rules in your workshops. And I think a very firm grasp of what makes a good workshop and what makes for a poorly organized workshop. So I would love if you would just share with our listeners, because a lot of them haven't taken any writing workshops or taken any classes, but if they're going to step into a class, what are the rules that they should be looking out for? What are the service rules
Sarvas
for
rules, yes.
a good workshop?
And it's funny, they haven't changed all that much over the years. I feel like maybe I should be evolving more with the times, but I don't. Well, first, look, what I always say about workshop is that, and this is so important for people to understand, the day that your submission is workshopped is the least important day in the workshop. That's it. The experience of the workshop is about you having to think critically about somebody else's work week in and week out, and how to develop a vocabulary to talk about what is going on in that work, and to have the precision and the vision to be able to see the issue and articulate it. Because, you know, Kelton, to go back to our athletics metaphor, that is a muscle. And that is a muscle that you can absolutely develop the shit out of, and you become a strong self-editor by doing that. The more you can edit other people and the more you can sort of quickly look and see and put your finger on the thing that the submission does well and that the submission needs some work on, is, you know, you learn that over hundreds and hundreds of hours of workshopping, and that will change you as a writer. And then, you know, if you're lucky, if you've landed a good cohort, you may get some useful notes back. You may not, but it is that development of your own um, self-editing eye that is critical. So, you know, my rules of the workshop include things like, I'm not one of those who like, okay, you're going to read 5 pages in your workshop in real time, and then we're going to talk about it. It's all done in advance. You know, you get the pages in advance. I tell my workshoppers, you must read these multiple times, minimum of 2. You know, I think 3 is best, but at least 2 times. Mark up the pages to really interact with what's going on the pages, and then to write a meaningful cover letter that synthesizes your big picture praise and your big picture reservations, observations, critique, whatever words you want to use. I think so. I think those things are really important. That's one rule of the workshop. Another rule of the workshop is, as the workshopper, the person who is giving the critique, think about what the writer is trying to accomplish, not what you want them to do. You know, Krisserin will remember I have my sign that I start to hold up in my workshop. Whenever anybody
I was going to
begins,
say, where's the note card?
whenever anybody begins their note with, well, you know, I shut them down. Because it's not your fucking book. I don't care what you wanted. So that's not the way to formulate a critique. Now, on the other hand, the impulse that leads to the I want, there's usually something there. So, you know, if you want to say, well, I wanted more action, maybe the note is, I felt that this section lacked conflict and narrative tension. You know, those are the kinds of things where you learn how to talk about what's going on in these pages. I like the writer to talk. I like the writer involved, but I don't want the writer to defend. You know, that's something that, you know, and I've ejected people from the workshop over the years who just sort of stubbornly defend their work instead of listening to the note. I think good writers will listen to the feedback and they'll ask questions like, hey, that's an interesting point. You know, if I did this, do you think it might address that? Or where did you start to feel your attention drift? You know, I think the writer's questions should be targeted at pulling out the nuances of the reading experience, because that's what you want. What was the reading experience for you? What did you go through as you were reading my pages? And honestly, be rigorous, be disciplined, show up. If I find someone phoning it in, you know, they're out. If I find someone who things like you have to deliver your notes in a timely fashion to the writer so they can work with it. I have those kinds of administrative rules. But and the other thing that I tell people is especially if you're joining a new workshop, I think that, and sometimes I get the question of, oh, well, what should I submit? What should I submit to the workshop? I say, resist the temptation to submit the polished thing that everyone's going to love and will tell you what a great writer you are. And I know why that feels good, and I know why we want that. I said, the thing to give in the workshop is, I have been struggling with this chapter for 3 months, and I know it doesn't work, and I don't know why. I need other eyes on it. Please tell me, what's going on here. And sometimes people submit those and they're like, dude, I think this chapter is great. And then other times people are immediately like, well, look, what's going on here is this, and that. So I think put in the stuff that isn't there, but you don't know why. Don't submit the stuff like where this isn't working, but I know exactly what the problems are, because that's not going to give you any useful information either. So, and, treat your peers and colleagues' work with respect and diligence, and really pay it the kind of attention that you want to see given to your work. Otherwise, you answer to me.
That's right. Kelton, do you have any other questions for Mark before we sign off?
No, I'm sad and sorry I missed the beginning of the interview, but it is a pleasure to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too, and good luck with your next chapters. Krisserin did talk a little bit about what you've got going on.
Thanks very much.
Fingers are crossed. Well, thank you.
Right.
This was wonderful.
It was so great to have you finally on the podcast, because I feel like I talk about you all the time.
It's true,
It's like,
she does.
Very
My
flattered.
teacher Mark says.
Well, that doesn't mean you can't blame me when it all goes badly. So, but
I do that too.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
I should not
I
have
will
listened to
say-
Sarvas. God damn it. I should never have listened to him.
I will say, I was trying to compile my querying history as for one of the episodes, and there was an agent who back in 2014 had emailed me maybe 3 or 4 times asking for the Gustafson novel. And I have email chains of you and I going back and forth, and you were like, don't send it till it's ready. If she's a good agent, she'll wait. And then that lead completely dried up because I stopped working on the book, and then I had a baby.
Yeah.
But I was like, what would have happened if I would have sent her something?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Babies.
Yeah.
Who
I know.
knows?
Fucking
Babies, they ruin everything.
babies fuck it all up, man. It's the worst.
Oh man. Well, Mark, tell the listeners where they can find you and where they can learn more about the services that you offer and the classes that they teach, and where you
Sure.
post about your news.
Sure. I say I post less and less these days. I'm conscious effort to spend less time online. I have a website, marksarvas.com, and my editing services and so forth are touched on there. And maybe the one thing I'll mention is that, we're talking about residencies and retreats. I do an annual writing retreat up in the Monterey Bay area. My partner, Jennifer, runs a literary organization called To the Lighthouse, the website being tothelighthouse.net. And she works with me to put on this retreat. You'll find the link on the page. And it's basically, you come up to the Monterey Peninsula and stay in a quaint little room for 4 days. We bring your lunch to you, and we, try to make it feel like a mini Yaddo or a mini kind of residency. And you just write. And it's not a workshop. It's about coming and spending time with your novel. I give 2 craft talks, usually one on Friday night, one on Saturday night. But it's really about sitting down with your book, working all day, spending the evening hanging out with the other writers who are there. And it's a lot of fun. We've had people coming back year after year, and we didn't do it last year because of just logistical stuff, and almost didn't do it this year, but we decided, we can't deny them another year. There's only 3 spots left, and it's in April, like that middle weekend in April. So that's a fun time. I've had people who finish their novel, they have a first draft, and they spend the weekend reading it, going through it, marking it up and figuring out what they have. I've had people who've come up with no idea what to write, just knowing they wanted to write a novel, and they sit in their room, and by the end of the weekend they churn some stuff out. So it's a lot of fun, and that's the next thing that I'm offering. I have pulled back on my editing offerings at least through June of this year, because I am focused on my novel right now, and I'll take on a few new clients in the second half of the year, but as I said, I'm trying to put that a little bit in the back seat while I get this very difficult, tricky, complicated novel on its feet.
Awesome. Well, it sounds great. Thanks, Mark, so much for being on the podcast. We really enjoyed having you.
Thank you both. It was great, and I appreciate the invitation.
All right. Wow, what a treat. What did you think of my teacher, Kelton?
Listen, I loved him. I also have to tell the listeners, if you're like, wow, Kelton was awfully silent in the beginning, it's because I got called into a work call and I couldn't join for the first half. So I was so glad I could make it for the second half because he's a treat. You know, he's such a good reminder for us, especially at this stage in our book writing career, that like this is just the beginning. Like the point is to be an author for the rest of your life. And so these things that we're doing, we're the applying, the querying, there are things that will happen again and again if we're doing what we really want to be doing. Mm-hmm. And to think of it as a career and not like this thing you do on the side that like hopefully works out. So I found him refreshing.
Yeah, he didn't publish his first novel till 44, which definitely makes me... Mm-hmm. I was thinking about it, you know, I'm 41 now, and his whole literary career happened for the most part. I mean, he was obviously blogging and screenwriting, but in his mid 40s and has happened since then. And I think that we're still young and we forget that we have all of these other lives to live ahead of us. We can't even conceive of what our life is going to be like when we're in our 60s and our 70s. And I find that, you know, very encouraging. One thing that he did talk about before you hopped on was we talked a little bit about how the culture has changed with querying and agents. And he said this like ghosting culture is a very like kind of new phenomenon where even his agent, who has these relationships that he's built with editors and publishers over the years, when they were sending out his most recent novel, they just didn't respond to his agent. And these are professional relationships. Can you imagine if you worked on multiple projects with someone and they didn't respond to your email for a new one? Not even a courtesy, hey, thanks for sending this my way, but no thanks, is not even happening anymore. So it's just, it's an interesting time that we live in, you know, when especially the literary landscape is changing. People are more and more impatient to enter publishing and get their book published, et cetera. And it takes more and more better writing to get through to the next step in your career.
There's also just more and more people in general.
Yeah.
And there's more and more people entering the field. And there's more and more ways to be contacted. You know, of course, you know, like every agent, it seems like I come across is like, do not talk to me outside of the query submission guidelines. Yeah. Don't DM me. Don't find me. Like you can follow me, but like do not slip into any inbox. I think that's totally reasonable. But it's crazy to hear that like people with working relationships are just not answering certain emails.
Do you ever think about whether or not you would want to be an agent? I mean, you're an editor. You have been for publications, and you have been contacted by writers, and you have had to kind of sift through the slush pile. Have you ever thought about it?
No, I don't want to. Liz, every time I did that as a job, there's definitely aspects of it I like, but at the end of the day, it always left me just desperately wanting to write. And so like the signals for me were very clear. It was like I did not find fulfillment out of being an editor. I found fulfillment out of the writing. Mm-hmm. Being an editor, like because it was always like for a big job. And so it came with the trappings of this is the company I work for. This is the benefits that I have. This is the salary that I get. And those were the things that were driving me, not the editing. Yeah. And so then I would be rushing through my job so that I could get back to writing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting though, because I had literally never considered being an agent.
There's a lot of agents that are writers. I know that you can go to MFA programs to become an agent.
The agents I see in their own bios, it says what they've written.
Yeah.
So I find that really compelling. But, you know, I do think I have a little bit of a grandiose star problem. You know, like This is a girl who wants to be on stage. I have visions of grandeur, and they're about me. Oh, good thing to know about myself.
I think you're just very honest about it. I feel like a lot of people feel that way and can be judged for it, but
Well, I also feel like it's often framed as like a very masculine thing. Like, oh, this person thinks they're so good. And then I'm always like, I think I'm so good. Oh no.
we all need a little bit of that in our lives. So if anyone listening feels like Kelton's confidence gives them permission to feel more confident about themselves, and
Please, I'm
you
begging you to use some of mine. It's so unwarranted so far, so please use some of mine.
When I think about my future, Mark and I talked a little bit about this before you jumped on also, which is you don't want to spend too much time, accepting awards that you haven't won in your mind that you haven't won yet. And it's really about focusing on the work and et cetera. But when I think about what I want, like what success looks like for me, it is very much kind of what Mark's life looks like, which is he has students that he works with, and he has a retreat that he does once a year, and he gets to go on residencies that he is applied to and been accepted to, and he gets to write. I think that is idyllic. I think that, obviously he has an older child, a teenager, so there's a little bit of flexibility in the childcare situation there, but that sounds great. And if we get to go and host retreats and have pen pals live recordings on stage, that would be fun too.
Yeah, I think our visions are somewhat similar. I don't see myself having one-on-one relationships with students. Last night was the first night of the rewilding winter practice, and it was awesome. And I really enjoy teaching to a crowd, but I think one-on-one is just not where I thrive in that way. When I envision my future, I talk a little bit about this in one of my query letters, specifically to the agent who reached out to me, where I was like, I see my work as an ecosystem that feeds itself, where I'm writing on the newsletter, which is driving to the class, which introduces people to the podcast, which brings people to the book. And I want all of these things to work as an ecosystem. And I want to grow all of them enough that I don't have to have clients that are outside this ecosystem. I don't have to, fly out of my orbit to be like, okay, what planet am I on? What are we writing about? Like, I want to write about ecology and neuroscience and ritual and magic and place and home, and just have that be my career. And so that's the goal.
It's a little Mel Robbins. It's a little Brene Brown. You'd be like the Brene Brown of ecology.
Yeah, I got to go back to school to become an ecologist, apparently, but who knows? Maybe I do go back to school for something. I had long considered going back to school for ecology or wildlife biology, but it doesn't financially make sense with the life I want to live. So, there are a lot of people who teach through learned experience rather than through education, and I don't see why I can't be one of them.
Honestly, the only reason the MFA finally makes sense in my life is that it's not super expensive. The IAIA MFA is like $15K.
Yeah.
Which a year. And like the Bennington program that Mark went to was like $33,000 a year, plus travel, plus all of that stuff. So
yeah, plus you're not working, in most of those programs. You're at a crazy deficit.
Yeah.
And like that doesn't make sense in my house. So
yeah, same. The NYU MFA program's like upwards of, it's more than $50,000 a year for a 3-year MFA. I will say though, there is a low residency MFA and their sessions are in Paris. So that does sound nice.
Well, if you get 3 nice deals in a row, you could just use all the money you make to pay off your schooling.
No, because take out like 40% for taxes.
Oh God, yeah, totally. And for your agent and for the publisher. Good luck.
If I do get into IAI, I will be in New Mexico twice a year. Maybe you can drive down, say hi.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, I would love to drive down. And that's where I'd like to host a retreat.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I think that would be so cool. We did get one listener write in and say that she would attend a retreat with us. So thank you, Jenna, for writing in.
Jenna gets an early bird discount to the retreat, okay?
That's right. And the best room after hours.
Yeah, she gets the best room.
Absolutely. All right, Kelton,
All
what
right,
are
so-
our goals for next week?
Query 3 more agents.
I love it.
I'm getting live feedback right now from that friend who's reviewing it, and I do want to take in some of her consideration, because one thing I kind of had left out of my queries, it's funny, you write so much for these nonfiction proposals, and I assume for the fiction ones as well, but one of the things that kind of slipped out of there was like, why this book right now? And she's right that is like a thoughtful, smart thing to include in terms of like marketing, but it is kind of peppered into the marketing and promotions aspect of the proposal, but it's not specifically in the query letter. Like, why would this book land over the next 2 years? And so she is right that I want to include that, especially for the agents that she knows, because they're commercial people. So I'm gonna work on that. So I have a little bit of work to do on the proposal, and I will query 3 more people.
Amazing. Well, the one goal that I did not achieve this last week was taking myself out on a date at the library.
You said you accomplished all your goals, you little liar.
I forgot about that one. I did think about it, actually, because I had to go to the doctor. I hurt my knee playing tennis, which I feel like I'm falling apart. I've got like skin problems and I hurt my knee. So I went to the doctor, and at the doctor's office, like nearby, there's a bookstore, and I thought about going in, but then I was like, wait, if I don't leave now, I'm gonna have to pay for parking. So I left.
My God.
I will go though. I think that is my, I have my meeting with Kima next Friday. I do want to go and do that research that we talked about. And
Great.
I kind of want to start reading some short stories. I feel like short stories inspire me to write more. So I've been in a little bit of a book slump. I did start reading the silly book by an author named Lila Sage. She did a bunch of Western romances. This character, though, in the book that I'm reading, I forget what it's called. It's got some cute title. She reminds me so much of you. She's got a nose piercing and lots of tattoos, and she can speak to ghosts, and is from a small little mountain town in Wyoming. So I was like, this is Kelton.
Yes, does sound like me.
I feel like I'm reading a book about Kelton. So I've been slowly enjoying that, but I've been in a little bit of a slump. So my goal this week is to go to the bookstore and to the library and do a little bit more research and to pick up a short story collection to read.
Exciting.
Yeah. Still not writing though.
Yeah, but what, you're not supposed to be right now. You did your grad school application. Like, you're meeting with your agent. You're going to go out on submission. Give yourself a break.
All right. That was one thing Mark said. He was like, you need to celebrate. When you finish a draft, even the first draft, you need to go out to dinner. You need to celebrate. It's an accomplishment. And I feel like I finished the second draft and I was like, okay, I'm just going to, next thing. So yeah. I do need to take a beat. So I will do that for myself. But in the meantime, I'm excited to hear about your querying and how successful you are at that, because I'm sure you'll get it done.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, I'll be texting you as I slip into people's inboxes. There's so much I don't know, and we're going to find out all of it later.
Yep. You learn on the job with querying, unfortunately, but I'm excited, and it sounds like you're getting a lot of feedback and intros. And so I feel like there's magic in the air. I feel like there's good news on the horizon. And all of the astrological things say, including the Chinese astrology.
It does say that this is our year.
It's our year. My year is going to be hard. I'm a rat. I'm a wood rat. And this year is the year with the fire horse. It's like completely oppositional to what I'm in, but it means it's meant to be like challenging and transformative. So let's hope. Let's hope that it's all positive. Because guess what? My year, my astrological year, the year of the rat, was 2020. So.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
I'll take this year. 2026.
All right. Everybody, you know where you can find us. Do send us emails and questions. We would love to answer your questions at officialpenpalspod@gmail.com. Find us as Pen Pals Pod on all the platforms. You can find Krisserin's writing at krisserin.substack.com. You can find my writing at shangrilogs.substack.com. If you like Shangri-Logs, I am asking you to share it with people because I can hit my goal of 10,000 subscribers soon. If people help
Really?
me. If people help me.
That's so
I
exciting.
need some help getting people to read it because like the Substacks ecosystem is so saturated, you know. And follow us on social media. You can follow me on Instagram at KeltonKin or Kelton Writes. I don't know what I'm doing. We'll talk about that next week.
supposed to talk about it 2 weeks ago. Every time I create a reel and I tag both accounts, I'm like, what am I doing?
You're
Kelton
being
was
a
supposed
good
to tell me.
friend. You're being a good friend. We will. I swear to God, we'll talk about it next week. I'm making that one of my
Okay.
goals to talk
Okay.
about Instagram.
Okay. Okay.
And you can find us both on TikTok, even though it feels like we're supposed to banish that now. I haven't been reading the news, but the news basically was like, don't use this anymore.
Well, yeah, it's like now
What
a bunch of
happened?
Trump cronies are running it. So I'm like, I don't
Oh no! God
I
damn.
don't want to. I know. Literally, we can't have anything.
Ugh.
Anything.
It's a nightmare out there.
It really is.
Not
I
in here
just-
though.
No.
Send an email to officialpenpalspod@gmail.com for a good time.
Yes. Let us know how you're doing. Let us know if you want to go on a retreat. We love to hear from you. We're a safe space.
All right, love you guys. Happy writing.
Happy writing.